on YouTube.
Yeah, nice. Hi, YouTube. A lot of people are early. 15 people already. Hi, everybody. We're gonna wait a minute or two just so everyone is can join up, and we'll start the official town hall.
Mm-hmm.
Them, while we're getting ready, or throughout the town hall that we do. So if you have them now, you can submit some, and we'll add those to the queue of questions, and hopefully we'll get some good questions and some good conversations.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll give it another minute or two. If people are still joining in now or didn't hear me at the beginning, we'll give it a minute or two more just so people have a chance to join in. I see someone's already submitting a question, which is good. If you're watching this on a desktop or laptop or PC or something, or really anything, if you touch the screen or at the bottom of the screen, there's going to be a Q&A option. If you hit that, you can submit questions to us. And hopefully, we'll have some good questions and we can get to some things going on. I see them rolling in now. So we'll keep a record of those and go along as we get there. One of the submissions is not a question, but it just says you both look great. Looking forward to a great call. So
thank you.
I guess not
Thanks.
the moderator. I see how it is. All right. All right, let's get started. Hi, everybody. My name is Jason Creshew. I am the interim chairperson of the New Jersey Progressive Democrats of Union County. Before we get into our town hall here, I just want to say, in light of everything going on, I hope everyone is safe and healthy. You're practicing good social distancing, hygiene, staying indoors when you can. I know it's a tough time, but together we can get through this as long as we're all doing our best practices to do so. With the pandemic and everything going on, obviously it's hard for a lot of people to gather together. We would have loved to all do this in person, but in light of that, we are hosting our first virtual town hall here. And I am here, lucky to be moderating with two of the candidates running in office for Plainfield Council, Emily Morgan and David Rutherford. So thank you everyone for joining in and for watching us. Again, there's a Q&A option on the bottom of the screen. If you hit that, you can ask and submit questions throughout the town hall, and hopefully we'll get to those. But off the top, let's just hear a little bit about our candidates and meet them for those who don't know them. So we can start with Emily. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about yourself?
Good evening. I'm Emily Morgan, as stated, and I'm here because I believe in government for the people. I've been a resident of Plainfield, New Jersey for over 20 years. And during that time, I've served for 5 years as a committee person for the Plainfield Democratic Committee. I've been a Democrat since the age of 21. I've participated in many election campaigns in Newark and Essex County. And I'm just very thrilled to have this opportunity to move from being a Board of Education member. I've been a Board of Education member for 5 years as well. And I'd like to move to the next level of government that really affects the lives of every citizen in the city of Plainfield, New Jersey.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Emily. So now it's here. Meet David Rutherford. How you doing, David?
I'm doing pretty well. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Whether you're here live or you're watching this after the fact, we hope to have a good, spirited discussion. This is new because of coronavirus. This is the first time anything like this has been done, and while it's necessary, while we have to do this because of coronavirus, I think that we turned over a new leaf. This is a good way to engage people, I think, moving forward, even next year and the year after. My name is David Rutherford. I was born and raised here in Plainfield. I went to Philadelphia to get my bachelor's in architecture, and I moved to France for a year after graduating. But in 2011, I came back here to Plainfield, um, and where I've been ever since and where I plan on staying. Um, Ever since I was very young, I was involved in local and statewide politics because back in those days, when your parents were involved, you were. And my grandmother and my mother were very involved in local and state politics in Plainfield and elsewhere in New Jersey. So they say I was potty trained in the headquarters. I don't remember that, but I take their word for it. I do remember being 4 years old in headquarters. In middle school, I worked on legendary Congresswoman Elizabeth Urquhart's first ward councilwoman, sorry, first ward city council campaign. Um, but that was all when I was young. As an adult, I became involved in Plainfield. In 2013, when I started a blog called Plainfield View, a lot of people remember it for the piercing progressive critiques in it, but 80 to 90% of the stories were human interest stories. And I really developed a love for writing and creating content. And I say all that to say, I became a writer. I was an architect. I became a writer professionally. And it's because of the village of Plainfield. We talk about how a village, it takes a village to raise a child, but even as an adult, it was the encouragement of the, hundreds of core readers of the blog in Plainfield that kept telling me to follow my dreams and become a writer. So Plainfield was a village when I was growing up as an adult, and I hope it continues to be my village as I raise my own children someday. Another reason it's important that it's to say where I work is that I don't work for the county or the city, so I can be totally independent as a member of the city council. So anyway, in 2014, with the encouragement of these same people in this village of Plainfield, I ran for Board of Education. I was the youngest person elected to the Plainfield Board, where I served one term. And I think in Plainfield, we have a different Plainfield than the one I grew up in for several reasons. One is, for example, we had robust tennis and baseball programs when I was growing up. We have neither right now in any strong capacity. We had more youth employment and development opportunities. We had a YMCA, which also doubled as a homeless shelter. And we had a hospital. Some of these these problems lay at the feet of municipal government, some not quite, but it's the responsibility of the city to fill these voids where they exist. So I'll just say, I think we are also at a city at a crossroads right now. Developers are begging to come in everywhere that has a train station, including Plainfield. So we must use the desire of these developers to come here to benefit the people who already live in Plainfield. That means not building Wawas where they shouldn't be. You get one shot. These developers are trying to come in now. The decisions that Plainfield makes in these next 5 years will have repercussions for 50 years. These pilots are 30 years. So it's really a crucial moment in the history of Plainfield right now. And that's why I'm running for city council.
Great. Well, thank you both for introducing yourselves, and thank you both again for being here and taking part in this virtual town hall. For the people who I just see, we got a lot of new people who joined in, both on YouTube Live and through the webinar. Thank you for joining us. There is a Q&A button on the bottom of the screen. So if you have questions as we go along, you can submit questions to us and hopefully we can get to them. But the first question we're going to start with is something that we started off the top of this town hall with, and I think is on everyone's mind, which is the COVID-19 virus and the pandemic we're dealing with now. So the first question for both of you is, in the face of the devastation of the coronavirus in New Jersey, and the reported death of at least 26 of Plainfield citizens. What is being done to care for the homeless and other deeply vulnerable members in our community? And you can also, I guess, talk a little bit about just today, the Plainfield police started enforcing the shelter at home order. So just in general, anything about the homeless or vulnerable populations in the city, or restrictions and things going on with coronavirus in general in Plainfield. Do you want to take that first, Emily?
Yes, I am certainly concerned about the event that is occurring now, and it will have an impact probably for at least the next 6 months to a year. I'm disappointed that our federal government has not provided a means for our health professionals to perform their duties and to help save the lives of the individuals who are suffering from this issue. A major concern, which has been a major concern of mine for quite some time, is the fact that we don't have the availability of test kits. So we are not really clear where this process will lead us, but we don't have an idea of how many people are actually affected by this virus. I hope that we reach a point where we can provide all the health care that is needed for our city, state, and our country as a whole. I'm very concerned about the fact that there is no housing, basically, for people who are homeless. Unfortunately, there are many children who attend our school district who are homeless. And we really need to step up to the plate. When I say we, I mean the citizens' request to the mayor and the city council to let them know that we're interested in the lives of those people who live in our city and are less fortunate. One of the places that a lot of homeless people congregate is in the train stations. And that's a problem for many reasons, but the big problem is they do not have a place to live. I'm very concerned about the fact that the Muhlenberg Hospital is no longer available to serve the people in this community. Had that hospital remained open, then we, the people of Plainfield, would have access to critical care. So that was a very unfortunate decision. And I hope that as I join the Plainfield City Council, that I will be able to help the City Council make decisions based on the needs of the citizens in this city. That's one of the roles of council people, is to observe what the citizens need, have communications with the citizens to find out what's important to them. So now we're in a situation in a city with 62,000 residents where we do not have a hospital facility. That's very unfortunate. And the coronavirus is making it very clear that we missed an opportunity to provide services to the members of our community.
Yeah, definitely. David, you have anything to add to that conversation topic?
So I will echo Ms. Morgan's concerns about coronavirus and the federal, state of the entire response. I believe has been too little and too late. It's something in February I was like, this is coming. What are they going to do? And we can reiterate it. We can relitigate it as much as we'd like, but I think everyone knows that the response was not adequate. It's interesting though that in a pandemic, people worry about folks that they weren't necessarily worried about before. For example, homeless people have always been forgotten because they don't vote. Many can't vote. Most don't vote. But now that there's an infectious disease, they can spread the disease just like anyone else, and their vulnerability makes us all vulnerable. So now in the last few weeks, you've been hearing a lot about homeless people and what to do about homeless. I mentioned when I spoke before that in Plainfield, we had the YMCA, which at least helped somewhat with the homeless problem. Not totally, but it provided some services. on a municipal level, you have to be creative when it comes to the homeless. One problem is that the homeless population isn't always identified. They're just floating there. I know there's some tech companies that some small cities have worked with. We had Lime Bike here, so we have invited tech companies, but there are tech companies that identify who the homeless are, what their skills are, what their needs are, to best find a transition for them out of that situation. Because every homeless person is an individual with different needs, with a different story. So that's something that I think you have to get creative with it. And I think that this pandemic is a good time for us to really examine all sorts of issues that people usually let go by the wayside uh, under normal circumstances.
Okay. And sort of piggybacking off of that, you both talked a little bit about, sort of the duties and responsibilities and thinking outside the box, things you would do to the with the city and around Plainfield that aren't necessarily getting done now. So another question we have here is, in general, what are the responsibilities of a city council person? And sort of beyond those basic responsibilities, do you feel that you as a council person or any council people owe the community anything more outside of what might be their official duties or, the job description they have?
Mm-hmm.
You want to keep going with that, David?
Yeah, so the city council, they're lawmakers on a local level, ordinances, they approve businesses coming in, approve development. And there are the official duties that we all know of a city council person. I think it goes a little further than that, or it would be for me, even on the Board of Education, I thought it was important to be an education activist who was part of broader movements involving education. I remember there was someone who created a school in this area who had a really bad history, went bankrupt in several other states. And another progressive school board member told me, hey, this person is creating a school in your area. You need to write about it. And so I wrote about this one individual, and it was shared by people who were trying to keep his schools away from their districts all around the state. One of my most popular ones that I wrote, I was interviewed about it a couple of times. So I think that it's important. You're not just a leader and a policy maker in Plainfield. You're also a representative and leader. Your words carry more weight when you have that title. So you should use it in other ways that aren't necessarily your voting record as a city councilor. And that's what I intend to do.
Yeah, definitely. Emily, yeah, same thing. Can you talk a little bit about what you think well, I guess what are the responsibilities of a council person, and then, what other duties and things you think are important as an elected official to be doing?
Well, I think it's very important that we understand the work of the city council. And one of the works of the city council is that we must work collaboratively with state and federal agencies on local issues, such as funding for public schools, funding for public libraries, healthcare services, and public safety. We need to absolutely provide some means and some support for people who are homeless in our city. And certainly we need to provide for more recreational facilities in Plainfield. And so one of the things that I think the city council and the mayor should focus on right now is the 2020 census. That census is very important to the future of this city. And we must remember, the census only takes place every 10 years. So if we miss this window, we will not have an opportunity to make sure that we can provide services for our children and our citizens as it relates to health needs. And so we really need to focus on that. We need to be involved on every demographic of our citizens. We have a large number of citizens who are not from our city or our country, and we need to focus on them. I remember as a child growing up in Newark, the immigrants were European immigrants, and they were a part of our school district, and they were a part of our community, and we all lived and work together. And I think that's the position that we as city council people should take. Also, I'm concerned about the pilot projects and their long-term impact on our city. So if we work collaboratively with our leader in the city, the mayor, we can probably present a program or process that would cause the pilot programs to actually benefit the citizens in Plainfield. There's a city nearby, Woodbridge, New Jersey. They've had a lot of pilot projects in that particular community, but the mayor and the city council made a commitment to use at least 25% of the funds to provide for special projects within the school district. They have a brand new museum. Their field has been renovated. And so $25 million is a lot of money, and that would really help our district. And the pilot projects could then not only benefit one group, but benefit the entire city. Another concern I have is about clean streets. That's one of the responsibilities of the people who are the leaders, the official leaders of this city, the city council and the mayor. If you take a drive on South Avenue and you are in Plainfield, and within 2 blocks of entering the next city, you see a totally different environment. You know that you have actually left Plainfield. And for the funds that we receive and from taxpayer dollars, we should make sure that Plainfield is a wonderful, beautiful place to live. And I think we have the capacity to do that. We just need to make a commitment to do that. So I believe that we are better together, and all we need to do is just care about our city and about each and every resident of the city, and make sure we provide the services that they need, as well as an environment that helps people grow and feel comfortable. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. You actually mentioned something we have a couple of questions submitted on that David, maybe you can talk a little bit about. I guess there's a few different ones, but they're all essentially about the same sort of thing, about what the long-term effects of pilot programs are in the town, on taxpayers, on services. So can you talk a little bit about the pilot programs and how those are affecting Plainfield?
Sure. So I'll try to keep the math simple. But if you have an average cohort of 400 Plainfield residents, they're represented by somewhere around 700,000 in property taxes. I'm talking men, women, children. When a pilot comes in, for example, one that we have on South Avenue with 400 residents, they're paying in the pilot something like 300,000. So the advocates will say, well, these properties now with the pilot, they're paying more taxes than they did before, which is true, more than the old properties. But there's a lot more people. So what happens is, per person, these pilots underfund cities. And that's the issue. And that's why when negotiating these pilots, it's important to make deals that best benefit the city. Developers, I'm not a developer, but I have worked in architecture with these sorts of clients. They claim that they cannot get funding without a pilot of some sort. But if that's the case, and if we do bite the bullet and say, okay, there has to be some pilots, we certainly should be negotiating the best one possible. Like Ms. Morgan said about the one in Woodbridge, that sounds wonderful. We have some pilots that don't even have an affordable unit in them. Usually even places, upscale places, Westfield, they have an affordable unit in a pilot program because it's a principle of it. So I don't understand why Plainfield would not. Also, I don't really trust people negotiating these pilots who take so much money from developers. What do we think the developers are paying for? I looked at Mayor Mapp's 2021 mayoral account, and he funds a lot of these city council races from that account, tens of thousands of dollars from developers, almost 100,000 from vendors and potential vendors. So if the developers are paying the lawmakers, what kind of deals do you think we're getting in return? which is why I think that the crux of a lot of these problems, including the pilots, is campaign finance reform. Plainfield had relatively strong laws regarding vendors with campaign finance. There was like a $300 limit for current vendors. That didn't cover future vendors and potential vendors, but at least for current vendors, there was a limit. Mayor Mapp and the city council, they scrapped that. Developers give money at will. They have their relatives give, they give a whole lot of money. Why do you think there's a Wawa? When stuff doesn't make sense, when something says, why would they ignore the master plan and put a Wawa when the master plan doesn't call for one? These people aren't stupid. They know where their bread is buttered. And that's by the people who give them large sums of money for campaigns. So I think that's very important. It's the same thing if we bring it to a national issue. Everyone said, why didn't the United States government take the coronavirus tests from the World Health Organization? Why? Because they wanted to give contracts to their own people to produce their own tests. It's always about money, and then they get the campaign contributions in return. It's a racket, and you can't talk about pilots without talking about the developers and their large sums of money.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem. I'm sure a lot of people in Plainfield and in New Jersey in general, unfortunately, are familiar with. So Emily, I know you talked a little bit about pilot programs in your previous answer, but David brought up at the end a good point in general about kind of donors and money in politics. So can you just kind of talk a little bit about the impact of money in local politics and politics in general?
Yes, and I'd just like to add one other point concerning the several pilot projects that we have in our city now. The occupancy rate is about 25%. So it's not really beneficial. Apparently, there's no real market for that type of housing here in Plainfield. So that's one of my concerns about the pilot project. Would you repeat the question again for me?
Oh yeah, sure. And I just asked, we had a question about David mentioned a lot of those kind of pilot things and developers and all that are kind of tied to campaign financing and money in politics. So just your thoughts in general on the impact of money in local politics.
Well, I do not have a real idea or data that would help me make a decision concerning campaign funding as it relates to pilot projects. However, I will make a commitment to take a serious look at that when I become a city council person, and I'm sure I will be able to identify how the pilot projects are somehow may be connected to politics here in Plainfield.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Sort of related to that too. These questions are good. Again, I know I repeated myself a few times, but for new people joining, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. So if you want to submit questions as we go along with this, we have about 5 or 6 left in the queue now, and they keep coming in, so that's great. If you have more questions, please do submit them, and we'll try to get to them as we go along. So I guess the next thing we can get to along the lines of pilots and kind of developments in town that I know David mentioned before. One of the questions we have here is, can each of you speak a little bit about the work you will do to prevent outsiders, I assume they mean outside companies or corporations, from coming in and taking over new developments and then in turn moving current residents out of the city? And that sort of relates to one of the other questions we got submitted to about gentrification. And what are you going to do about residents losing their homes or being priced out of the city because of the rise in rents from all these developments? So I guess, David, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, so I'll use the example of something that was passed recently. The city council voted to borrow $2 million to create a pedestrian mall right by the main train station on North Avenue. And they'll be paying back this loan for something like 30 years. And this loan, this project, they admit they have not done a parking study on the area. They have not studied how it's going to affect the businesses that are there currently that have been there for many, many years. This is a $2 million spend that doesn't care about anyone who's living or runs a business there right now, that is meant to woo developers. And that's all it's about. So that by definition, if you don't even study the impact to report to us about the impact on the current businesses there, it means you don't care about it. You could find out easily. You don't want to study it because you know what the impact might be. So that sort of thing, I would, if I were on the city council, I would have voted no on that. We must have respect for the people who are here currently, both businesses and people renting here. And any development that happens must also benefit as a whole the people who live here now, and that's not pushing residents out the city. There are places to build where no one is living now. I understand that. We have empty lots, especially in the transit-oriented area. There is space to build, but we should always be mindful of pushing people out who already are here living and have lived here for a long time.
Yeah. Emily, is there anything you wanted to add about that as far as gentrification of the residents, people being forced out of their homes by property developers, or people being forced out of the city in general because of rising rent costs and things like that?
I think it's important that we really pay attention to the demographics of our city. And I think it's important that we gather data that will help us make better decisions. My background, I have a bachelor's degree in accounting and economics, and I've spent a lot of time reviewing data. Data tells the story. And we, as we move on to become city council people, we have to demand that we get information that relates to data concerning our residents of our city. This city is not for sale. And what we need to do is stand on that premise firmly and demand that we get information to help us make more informed decisions, and also to take in account the needs of the people in our city. I think a large majority of our city may not be able to afford a two-bedroom apartment for $2,300 per month. And I think David made a great point when he stated that none of the housing that has been developed lately even has a provision for at least 5 or 10% of the apartments to go to people who do not have the ability to spend the $2,300 per month. So we have to be conscious of the citizens that we serve. We have to be aware of their needs. We have to be concerned about their concerns. And there are a lot of social economic issues that we should look at that information to make decisions that are beneficial to all the residents of Plainfield, New Jersey.
Thank you. So Emily, I'll stick with you because you mentioned in your answers there about the demographics and the people who live in Plainfield. One of the questions we got submitted asks, how would you unite our community with regards to our diverse population?
Well, I think the first place we should start is in getting more information, providing more opportunities for people in our community to have discussions about their concerns and their needs. And from that point, we'll be able to get a broader perspective of what their requirements are and what services we need to provide for them.
Thank you. David, same question. Can you just talk a little bit about, sort of United the City and the diverse populations there and how you'll deal with all that?
So I agree with Emily Morgan as well that we have to understand the population. That means any means possible. We have to make sure we understand better and survey and find out. It's with the diverse population, certain segments of the population, politically, folks perceive that they vote less and then give them less services. That should not be it. City Hall, the city government, city council should be as accommodating to everyone as possible. For example, my fiance is from Ecuador. My Spanish isn't the best. I'm working on it. I'm getting better. But the mayor puts out his newsletter and he puts it in Spanish, but it's like Spanish that just came out of Google Translator. Like she's like, "Oh, this is awful, really," and I'm just like, "Oh, it looked okay to me," But you got to know the people and make sure you're communicating. Even something as simple as that mayor's newsletter, it shouldn't come through Google Translate. This should be something that the city has the money to invest in communicating with the people at the very least.
Great, thanks. So a lot of questions are coming in here, which is great. Again, since we're at about the halfway point now, I see more people sort of filtering in. Thank you for coming to the virtual town hall hosted by the New Jersey Progressive Democrats of Union County. We're here with Emily Morgan and David Rutherford, who are two candidates for Plainfield City Council in the upcoming June 2nd primary. So thank you for submitting questions so far. Keep them coming if you have more of them. So we'll switch gears here a little bit. We have this one question submitted that has to do sort of with the school system. And I know you both said you have experience on either formally or currently on the school board in Plainfield as well. So the question is, are there official ties between the Plainfield City Council and the Plainfield Public School District? Whether there are or not, are there ways that the City Council can support the work of the educators in the city? Emily, do you want to start with that one?
Yes, I appreciate that question. Currently, the city of Plainfield provides SROs at our school district, several of our school buildings. So that is a major contribution because the city pays for the salaries of these individuals. And it's helpful to have these SROs in our building. We also have an agreement, a reciprocal agreement as a result of the city providing the SROs in the schools. Then we, the Board of Education, provides space for various meetings throughout the city. So that's one of the ways that we support each other. I frankly and most candidly will say that a lot of times there's not a lot of communication between the Board of Education and the City Council on a formal basis. I've been on the board for 5 years. I've yet to see the Board of Education meet with the city of Plainfield Municipal Council or the mayor. And I think that would be a step in the right direction because the future of Plainfield is the education of our children. So if Plainfield is to continue on, we need to ensure that all of our students are well educated. Unfortunately, for the last 10 years, the City Plainfield Board of Education has been underfunded by about $73 million. And that has a tremendous impact on the education that we can provide for our students. And we need to have a role where the city and the Board of Education work collaboratively to see just how we can find more funds, federal or state funds, county funds, to provide the services that our students need. So the collaboration would be an excellent move forward for progress for the students in the Plainfield School District.
Okay, David, same thing. What are your thoughts on the relationship between the Plainfield City Council and the school district and school board there?
I pretty much have the same thoughts as Mrs. Morgan. I believe it's called the Memorandum of Understanding, is the exchange of services. I think one more that there is the school board doesn't necessarily have the fleet that the city does in terms of snow removal. So the city will come and get the lots. There's an exchange of services like that. Of course, it could be better. It could be a lot better. As she mentioned, the school board might be the biggest landowner in the city. So the spaces are very valuable for the city. There could be much more working together and communication. That was something I observed when I was on the board, and it continues to this day.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say that one of the reasons that I'm running for the city council is to try to change the culture and bridge the gap between the city council and the Plainfield Board of Education. Because if we work together, we can do better for our students and our families who depend on us, city leaders, to make things happen in the best interest of our children and every member of our community.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you both for that. I think especially now with the pandemic going on, a lot of people being homeschooled and things, that both of your experiences currently or formerly with the Board of Education and bringing that to the City Council, I think a lot of people are seeing in the whole state why that is a good attribute to have. So I'm glad that both of you have that experience and are running for council there. So we have a handful of questions in the queue, and about half of them are about taxes, everyone's favorite New Jersey pastime. So there's a couple different ones.
Okay.
I guess, we can start with David. Just in general, people are asking what your plans are to cut and control spending and taxes in town, or how would you deal with the rising tax burden that's been added to the homeowners in the city?
All right. So when we talk about property tax, I like to give the context of it, as you did, of a very New Jersey problem. It's a problem everywhere in New Jersey. Nowhere in New Jersey do people have $1,200 property tax bills. Not in the place that has the most tax revenue coming in, or the least, to my knowledge. Um, but I know some obvious places that we could, by being a more efficient city government, save money. For example, just 2 weeks ago, mid-March, there was a verdict awarding $500,000 for a prosecutor for gender discrimination. It was a suit against the mayor. He testified. This prosecutor is making $20,000 a year. This is a $500,000. That's 25 years of prosecutor was spent on firing this person, according to the courts, the jury, and the judge, wrongfully. So more efficiency there, with lawsuits. We just, like I mentioned before, went into $2 million in debt for the pedestrian mall that isn't even studied yet. That I don't think I was hard enough on that pedestrian mall. 88% of pedestrian malls fail, between 86 and 88%, according to different studies. So I know borrowing $2 million is not going to lower anyone's property tax bill. I know salary increases, the mayor doubling the salary, which admittedly it's not a huge chunk of the budget, but it's certainly not helping. Neither are gas guzzling SUVs. All these things, to explain, there's 7 gas guzzling SUVs that are used by different cabinet members. All of these things add up. When you start spending money like that, a little bit here, a little bit there, it adds up. And it's why the city council, when we're talking about raising the taxes, they just voted to raise the cap on the taxes. And you say, oh, this is a tax hike. No, 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 no. We just raised the cap so we can hike them, but we may not. They're going to hike the taxes in April or May. We know it. So the taxes are going up, and I don't see responsible spending. And of course, we were talking about pilots before. Well, one way to lower taxes is to negotiate better pilots. But when you have the developers putting you in office with their money, your hands are kind of tied. So, I think I see some questions that are in the queue. One person said, if you don't develop, how will you bring in tax revenue? It's not about not developing. It's about developing in ways that increases the tax revenue and benefits the current residents. That is possible.
Great, thank you. Emily, same question about any of that. Cutting spending in town, controlling the taxes and the tax burdens on people. What do you think about all of that?
Well, I think a major factor that is missing here in Plainfield is accountability. And a part of accountability is transparency. So we don't have an opportunity to see the information or the data that is related to the city spending on salaries. We don't have any information concerning the monies that we receive from any of the projects, the pilot projects. And I was told many years ago, there was a supermarket that had that was a pilot, and they paid taxes for 20 years. And as soon as the 20 years was up, they moved out of town. So now what could have potentially been tax revenue is out the door because they're no longer in the city. So we need to have an understanding with these companies or corporations who would like to have house in this town, that we need, as a city, we need to benefit from those pilot projects. And they certainly could have an impact on lowering the taxes for our citizens. So we need to really demand accountability and transparency so that we will have a better sense of how we are spending the monies in this city, and are they really benefiting the citizens?
Thank you. Our next question here, speaking again about benefiting the citizens, Richard, thank you for your question. You asked, do you think our downtown, Plainfield's downtown, is healthy and successful? And if not, what would you do to change that? So David, do you have any thoughts on the downtown? Any plans for the downtown area?
The downtown area, one issue is vacant. There are vacant places where there's businesses and offices. We ought to do what's necessary to fill those up. We ought to do what's necessary to achieve more occupancy. We have lots that are not being used. I'm all for building and adding to our downtown in places where we don't have anything right now. So our downtown can be improved. We can have more density down there, and I believe that's what the master plan calls for.
Emily, same thing. Your thoughts about the downtown and any improvements we might need to make to it?
Well, a major improvement would be an effort to ensure that the city, the downtown, is clean and pleasant. It's not. I go to a beauty salon across the street on Watchung Avenue, and as I'm walking towards the building, all I see is trash and debris. It's almost as though we have a PMUA, we pay that's the Plainfield Municipal Authorities, and one of their responsibilities is to clean the streets. Someone needs to assure that that takes place, because it's really a dreadful sight. The parking lots have trash that's everywhere. And that is never, Plainfield will never attract a Starbucks or any other corporation into this town as long as downtown is unkept, it's dirty, and it certainly is not attractive.
One thing to piggyback on that, I wrote in late February, I wrote a blog post just about how deplorable people talk about garbage in Plainfield, but they're talking about different things. Sometimes it's on private property where there's a lack of enforcement, which is a serious problem, especially some of these industrial sort of sites on the West End near the train station. Deplorable enforcement. But also, it's not just the city-owned lots. They really are that bad. You won't believe it if you go down there. If you go down to any of the city lots, the trash and the garbage that is just let be there. Meanwhile, they want to spend $2 million on a pedestrian mall that we're supposed to believe they'll take care of. Not if they treat it like they treat those lots.
Yeah, and this goes right into the next similar question we have too. Emily, you mentioned about cleaning up and making it more physically attractive to invite kind of more modern, attractive businesses to come into the city and the downtown. Someone submitted a question asking, or I guess they were saying the strategy to attract millennials and walking wallets to Plainfield seems to be failing. What will you do to actually make Plainfield more attractive to millennials? So again, Emily, I know you touched on that a little bit in your answer. Do you have any additional comments on that?
Okay. Well, first of all, as I stated, we need to make Plainfield attractive in terms of the way that the city looks. It's not attractive, and millennials seem to like nice things. They like to feel comfortable. They like to feel safe. And they want an opportunity to, I mean, we have these new developments going up. And I think one of the things that was probably one of the things that made people think that that was a good idea is that the train station is very close to the new developments. So you would think that millennials would be interested in moving in those apartments. However, there are not many other services beyond where they live or near the train station. I think we have one coffee shop, maybe two, but it's really not attractive. And another thing is that a lot of the trains that leave from or depart from our train stations do not go directly into Manhattan. When we had the one seat program, a person could get on the train and go into Manhattan, I think, but it was from 10 a.m. in the morning. How many people have a job where they can arrive after 10 a.m.? So it wasn't, I don't think we thought the process through. And I think we need to look at that. I was at a meeting recently with the Union County Black elected officials, and we had someone there, a representative from New Jersey Transit Corporation, and they're interested in upgrading the Plainfield, both of the Plainfield train stations. And I think that may help to attract more people to our community if they know the train station has been beautified, that it's safe for them to leave their vehicles as they get on the train to go to work. So we need to just look at the entire picture of what is going on in terms of how can we attract millennials, and we also need to improve accessibility to New York City, because that's a big draw. I think that would be helpful to our city.
Yeah. David, your thoughts on, attracting millennials or young professionals into Plainfield and what needs to be done there?
So, right, to answer a question, I'm not so sure to what extent attracting walking wallets is failing. I know at the Quinn, I spent a day there, and it seems like they're getting a good amount of residents there, not necessarily millennials. And I'm not sure if the walking wallets are coming. The question is, I don't know if they're walking down our streets with their wallets or are they spending elsewhere. I get the feeling that they're not. But regarding millennials want to live here, as a millennial who does live here, it's sometimes it's hard for me to see it from the perspective of someone who's not from here. I have a different perspective because I'm from here, but I work in New York with other millennials, and when I say I live in Plainfield, they're like, "Where? Wait, how far? What? An hour? No, they want to live in Bergen County, Hoboken. People don't want to live that far a lot. That's just the reality." And to go to Miss Morgan's point, the one seat ride would help that. It would help it some if you at least say, well, I don't have to switch in Newark to go to New York. But I'm not sure it's ever going to be a millennial destination, because where I see millennials say they like to live, they're more built up places that are closer to the city. Doesn't mean you can't attract residents, but they might not be those millennials. The one seat ride is really important to me personally, but also to the city. I know it affects property values and all of that stuff, but it certainly makes it more convenient to go into New York. But I'm not sure it's ever going to be there will ever be millennials flocking to Plainfield. And I don't think that means you can't do good transit-oriented development without the millennials who tend to want to live closer to New York City, Newark, Hoboken, Kearney even. There we go.
Okay, thank you.
Also, everyone, we realize that we do not have a big name supermarket in Plainfield, nor do we have a variety of restaurants. We have to go to neighboring cities for a nice supermarket. South Plainfield, North Plainfield. We just don't have that here in Plainfield. And if you want to get something more than Dunkin' Donuts coffee, then you're out of luck, because there's nothing like that here in Plainfield. So millennials seem to, well, everyone would like to have a nice supermarket in their neighborhood. We don't have that. So it's very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Agreed.
All right. Thank you. So we can switch gears a little bit here now. This question probably takes a little preempting or some background if people don't know. So in New Jersey, for voters, as we all know, and maybe people watching do or don't, when you go and vote, you go before the ballot you have there. It's divided up into these grids and lines and columns that we have every time we have an election. Which is how they group candidates together into lines depending on what party or what group within one party certain people align with. And so the question we have here is asking about the line and why it's so powerful. And if you have any comments in general about ballot reform needed or not, the issue with the line or anything along those lines, no pun intended. David, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah. Oh man, this is quite a question. The line. It's extremely hard to beat the line in New Jersey. And it's partially, we can start off with the design of the ballot. I've only really voted in New Jersey. I think I voted in Pennsylvania a couple times, but for people who don't know, if you're not in New Jersey, most of you probably are, but New Jersey has, every political organization has its own line. So they're laid out vertically. So the first line is line A, and they have all their candidates there. And they're somehow, before I move forward, the Democratic machine is always line A. They say it's a random drawing every time, but they always get line A. So that's where you usually have the incumbent senator, maybe the incumbent president, but certainly the senator or the congressperson and everything. And then everyone lines up under them. And then everyone else is from line B all the way to, it could be H. So there's a strong incentive for people voting in the Democratic primary to vote with the machine, because of the first line that you see. They're the Democratic Party machine. They usually have the most incumbents. And also there's a tendency, especially in the Black community, we are very tied to the Democratic Party. We want the Democrats to win. So there's a tendency to vote for who's viewed as the strongest Democrats, so we don't lose to the Republicans. And therefore, just before the election even starts, before the money is raised, which the people on the line usually have the most money, before anything is done, there's a big advantage because you're the first candidates anyone sees. You're lined up there right in line A, and already anyone not on that line has a severe disadvantage. Now, I saw a ballot from Massachusetts, and what they did was, it'll say the presidential and it'll have the 3 candidates. Then it'll say Senate and have 3 candidates. Then it'll say Congress, 3 candidates, mayor, 3. So you never get them lined up. So for every single election, you're making a different choice. So if I say, oh yeah, this is my presidential candidate, that one, you don't make the connection that these people are necessarily aligned. Now you may know because they may have mailed you something that said, hey, we're all together, we endorse each other, but you have to make a more conscious decision. And just that little bit of difference in the design of the ballot makes the elections a lot more equitable, which is why I've always been an advocate for getting rid of the line in New Jersey from a ballot design standpoint, let alone a political one with the machine and all the levers that they have, how they can raise more money, how they can mess with people's jobs. They have a lot more power than just the line, but the line in itself, that ballot design, is crucial. And it's something that we need to fight to get rid of in New Jersey.
Yeah. Emily, what do you think about the ballot design or the line or, just voting in general in Plainfield and New Jersey?
Yes. Well, I would fully support a movement in our state to redesign the ballot. I think we have enough registered voters and people in our community who realize that the design of this state of New Jersey ballot is not really working for the broader number of people in terms of whether you're on the main line or you are in column D. So I think that we really need to develop an opportunity for people to have discussions about that at the city level and especially at the county level and the state. And we have to break habits. It's time to break habits and not just go straight down the line. That we would say line A all the way. We need to change that. We should not just look at the line. We should look at the qualities, learn more about the candidates in the other lines, but also not just always have line A all the way. We're talking about individual voting, not a group that's going for one line, or even after the fact that typically the line does not serve the needs of the people. The line is not concerned about the issues that face people every day: homelessness, fewer equitable opportunities in education, healthcare, health insurance, public safety. We need to have some dialogue with these people so that they recognize that we are not just going to rubber stamp someone because they're in column A, and candidates should not be elected by association. Candidates should be elected by their character, the quality of their leadership skills, their demonstrated leadership skills. So we don't need to just say column A and that's it. We need to look far beyond association with a line.
Agreed. And I just wanted to throw one more thing in there, a point I forgot to make about the ballot design. The school board ballots for many years, the powers that be know the value of the line and how tricky their design of the ballot is, because for many years, the school board, which was nonpartisan, was down below and you got a box at random. You could get, if there were 9 candidates, you got 1, 2, 3, all the way to 9. So people could work together and run together, but you weren't guaranteed to be right next to them. So it was like, hey, you could know I'm running with Jim, but I have to tell you, hey, I'm running with Jim. It makes it more equitable than when you're lined up. But they have started to make less democratic even the school board ballot. So now the school board ballot, they're lined up in slates. So that people can just line up with other candidates. So even the most democratic part of the ballot, they're starting to lump in with the rest and make it less democratic. And I think the whole ballot needs to be totally no lines. Maybe it even randomizes when you get, I don't know, but something needs to be done so that people can look at every race separately. The way Ms. Morgan just said, we should anyway. We should encourage them to do it even more by making an equitable ballot.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you both for the in-depth answer you gave on that. It's definitely a big issue in our state here. So we're close to the hour mark here, so we just have time for a couple more questions, and then we'll do a closing and wrap up. One of the questions here, please explain what you feel would be the highest and best use of the abandoned former YMCA building located directly across the street from City Hall. So Emily, we can start with you for that question.
Thank you. I think we can use that facility for multiple uses. One of the things we definitely would like to have a place for our students, our children in our district. We don't have a boys and girls club here in Plainfield. We need to provide space there for them, but we also should look at the possibility of providing on-site healthcare services in that building. We need to look at providing information to our citizens concerning health benefits and opportunities for guidance services, counseling services in that building, and maybe even have a portion of the building for homeless, as used as a temporary homeless facility. And if you have, say, a family, 2 or 3 families in that building who are homeless, then what we need to do is have counseling facility people on the premises. So when the family enters the building as homeless, the goal is to try to find ways to help them find affordable housing, etc. But we need to use that building for the entire community.
Okay, David, what about you for the YMCA building there?
Total agreement with Mrs. Morgan. There are so many needs the community has, and it's an empty building, which centrally located, which is a rarity. It's something that the city should certainly use to the advantage of the residents. My gut was a community center. There's been a lot of people in town advocating for a community center for quite some time. Um, and I've lost count of the amount of feasibility studies I've seen the city conduct over the last 10 years or so. Why not a feasibility study on a community center? How it would be funded, how much the city would fund, if there would be a private partnership. I'm not sure, but it's certainly, with all the study that I've seen, it's certainly something that's worth studying in its own right, to find the best use for such a centrally located building that I miss. I was a Y member for quite a while. So it was, to get into the why a little bit, it was falling apart a little. It was in bad financial shape. I was a gym member. I loved the sauna. The sauna was never working. It really disappointed me. But the building has great bones and it should be used to service the community. My gut is community center. I want to see it studied.
And
Okay.
I'd like to add that as we face this crisis with the COVID-19, it would have been great if we would have had at least some facilities to take our homeless people off the streets and provide them with some care and services and help them get back on their feet, even in the midst of the pandemic situation that we are in right now.
I agree. I think that's a really good point. You know, there was discussion they couldn't do it. I figured they may not be able to convert Muhlenberg into hospital beds because it was gutted a while ago. It would take too much money and too much time to bring it up to take care of COVID patients. But if it was a possibility to convert Muhlenberg to a hospital, it ought to be viewed as a possibility to look into, to take homeless residents back into the YMCA in this time of crisis. I see a parallel there. You know, it'd be nice if people looked into that.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so we have time for this one last question here from Timothy. What would you do about code enforcement? David, we can start with you.
Code enforcement. I touched on this kind of in a recent blog post. It's a sort of code enforcement in terms of the trash that's everywhere. That's the most evident that I see. Just as a resident without a lot of inside knowledge on all of that, I see the trash code is not enforced, particularly in the 4th Ward on the west end of the city. I swear some people wouldn't believe it if they just took a look at how bad it is. And all it is it's a matter of citing these owners the way residents are cited when they don't cut their lawn. You know, it's the same thing. So yeah, you have to up code enforcement. Maybe hire another code enforcer, but that's certainly something that's worth spending money on for the quality of life of residents in Plainfield who don't want to see trash around or other violations.
Thank you. Emily, same question. How do you feel about code enforcement? I know you mentioned before about the trash and garbage issues and things like that. What are your thoughts?
Yes, I think it's very important that we understand what the code items are, you know, and we should also, as David said, code should be enforced. Just recently, I parked my car on a 7th Street. No, let's see. I think it was 7th Street. Yes. Okay. And it looks as though the street hadn't been swept since last spring. So if the city is going to hold building owners and residents to provide certain care for their property, then the city needs to set an example, because they're setting up the example that we see now is extraordinarily poor. Our city is not getting the types of services that a city requires. So we need to move forward with full code enforcement.
Thank you. So thank you everyone for all the questions you submitted. We got through basically all of them, or touched on a lot of different topics. If you didn't get your question answered, or you had other things come up while we were talking that you might have a question about later, we'll definitely be doing more town halls like this in the future. And as Emily and David go through their campaign, I'm sure you'll have plenty of opportunities to ask them questions. So before we wrap up, we can start with Emily. Any closing statement you want to make? Any last information or anything we didn't touch on that you want to talk to the residents about before we log off here?
Yes, thank you for this opportunity. I'd like to really focus on collaboration and how the lack of collaboration between the city government and the Board of Education has had a negative impact on the students in our school district. There's a lot of things that we could do. One of the things that we need in our district, in the city, is opportunities for students who graduate from high school to learn technical skills and get involved in industries that pay a decent salary, but they just do not have the skills that are required for that. So I think we need to take a broad look and deep look into what is going on in our city as far as homeless people, people who feel disenfranchised. And a major point I'd like to make at the end of this session is the importance of the 2020 census. That impacts funding. And to this date, I have not seen a major effort or movement in our city towards ensuring that every person in this city is counted. Sometimes I believe people are here who may not be documented, but they still can be a part of the census. And we need to spread that throughout the city. You don't have to be afraid that ICE is going to come look for you or anything like that. We just need you on the census so that we could provide more services for everyone who is in this city. And I thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you. David, your closing statements or any final words?
So I'm going to reiterate what I said in part of my opening, that the city is at a crossroads. Not every decade is the same. I think from when I was born in 86, I think through the 80s and 90s and 2000s and most of the 2010s, there was not much building. There was no house building for sure, because there's no space to build homes. But now there's development in the transit area. This is something that's happening now, and you can't redo it. We need to handle this the best way we can to benefit the people in Plainfield the best way we can, by people who are not tied to just the developers, but also have the best interests of the people at heart. A lot of things have a lot of sizzle, like this pedestrian mall I keep bringing up, but then you go around the corner and no one cares about the lots, the parking lots that regular people use. You can't even know what spot to put your money in because the paint is fading off the ground. We can't, you don't know if you're in spot 88 or 80. So they're just, it's reflective of their priorities. We must care about everyone, must care about the homeless. We must care about services. We must care about recreation programs. That stuff doesn't make headlines. That stuff won't get some of these folks into higher offices. That won't get them a write-up in the Star Ledger, most likely. But it's important to take care of our residents and that's why I'm running for city council.
Great. So thank you again to both David and Emily. Thank you both so much for taking the time and doing this. And I know you talked a lot about transparency and being accountable. So it's always good to see candidates who can walk that walk and don't just talk about it. They show up and they answer questions and they're transparent. So thank you both so much. Thank you all to the viewers who tuned in to watch this live and participate in our virtual town hall. We had a lot of great questions. Like I said before, we will likely be doing more of these in the future, that you will have a chance to ask some more questions. So in general, if you want to follow some information about our organization or Emily or David, you can check out union.njprogressives.com. It has some info about Emily and David in Plainfield, as well as a lot of other progressive and like-minded candidates on the county level and in other municipalities throughout the county. If you watched and you like what you heard, we are a grassroots campaign. We are challengers trying to break up this machine. So any volunteering, phone calls, texting, telling your friends, donations, anything like that, Emily and David could really use your support. So if you like what they had to say and you want to support, you can go on to union.njprogressives.com/join and sign up to help out the movement and really help this grassroots campaign continue moving along. So thank you again so much for Emily Morgan and David Rutherford, two candidates for council in the Democratic primary coming up on June 2nd. So please come out and vote. Tell your friends and family to come out and vote. Every vote is going to count. And to echo David's words, you're not going to get a do-over with this. We are on an important election this year all across the state. And I'll hope you support these two great candidates that we have here for you. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. And thank you, Emily and David.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for everyone who tuned in.
Okay. Be safe and be healthy.